Good day, everyone, as we say down under in Australia. It's great to be with you for this three-part webinar series. I've titled this one, From Consumer to Consumer, How the Sale has Changed and What this means for your business. And I'll explain that in more detail later. But before I go any further, I'd love to know how many of you are already involved in thought leadership. So let's go straight to a poll. I'll give you 30 seconds to answer this. And then I'll publish the results. So over to you. Get you working straight away. I'll give you 30 seconds. If you could answer those questions, that'd be great, and we can take it from there. Let's get straight back to the slides, and I'll move on. Before I do get into it, I'd like to quickly give you a rundown on Infinite Media, an on-stream media company. And you know, while I could tell you that they cover things like audio conferencing, web conferencing, webinars, webcasting, virtual trade shows, and they've literally delivered 65,000 events since 2001. I think what's better if I tell you firsthand that my experience with them has been awesome. From the moment they first made contact, everyone has been a consummate professional. Nothing has been a hassle. The technology is great, and it's been exceptionally easy to use. So there you go, guys. It really doesn't get much better than that. I'm going to tell you what I'll cover in this webcast, but before I do, I want to tell you a little story. This is Jeffrey Bullers. Now, some of you may have seen his blog, Jeff Bullers. He has 160,000 Twitter followers. He has 4 million visitors to his blog annually, and he's ranked 11th by Forbes in their list of global social media power influencers. And I got to know Jeff this year, and we first connected online, and subsequently, you know, after a couple of guest posts on his blog and an interview that we did with him for an audio series that Dr. Liz Alexander and I are doing for our Leading Thought website, as well as some consulting work that Jeff is doing with me for my clients, it's clear to me that Jeff is exceptionally passionate about social media. He truly understands how it fits into a brand's communication strategy, how it should work with other marketing disciplines. And the other day I was just having a chat to the editor of one of Australia's leading business publications about their battle with shifting the focus and integrating their print and online presence. As you know, print is facing an enormous battle around the world in this regard. And because of Jeff's expertise in this area, I had absolutely no problem in instantly recommending him, and I set up a meeting with this editor to discuss this further. Now, that meeting's happened. It went exceptionally well, and this may lead to further business and even a possible interview for Jeff in the magazine. And then we're even looking at future roundtables with their C-suite audience, let alone possible consulting work for them that he may get down the track. And that may even lead to further consulting work with their global parent company. Now, if there was ever an example of the power of online content in positioning your brand, this is it. And here's the thing. Not everything Jeff writes is thought leading, and he'll be the first to admit that. And in fact, a lot of it is just great content. And I'll come to this thing around content and thought leadership in a little while. But Jeff's story is really just one of many that we have come across globally. And while he is one individual, there are compelling stories to tell about how thought leadership content of large multinational brands have not only boosted sales, but delivered a significant and long-term differentiator for their business. In Webinar 2, I'll go into some detail with some case studies and deliver actual results to you for those of you who are signing into that one. So this series of 3 webinars will look at the number of a number of things, but it's underpinned by one key outcome, and that is how to create eminence for yourself or your brand in your field of expertise. I'm going to be conducting the first 2 webinars, and Dr. Liz Alexander, my business partner and co-author of our award-winning book, At Thought Leadership Tweet, will host the third. Now, whether you're a business owner or work for a company or as a consultant across marketing, public relations, brand, content, or social media, we know firsthand that there is a better way for you to engage with and to deliver content to your clients and your prospects. And the focus of this series is thought leadership and how it can substantially impact you and your business profile. And I'll give you some compelling evidence as to why thought leadership is the ultimate brand differentiator and how I believe it's supplanted the traditional way of selling products and services. But for today's webinar, this is really what I'm going to cover, how the consumer has changed, and that's critical to understanding why thought leadership and content is important. And to that point, content is not any king, it's queen and subject. I'll tell you a very little-known fact about thought leadership. It's called schema cracking, and I'll give you a little bit of an insight as to what that means. And then I'll talk a bit about thought leadership, what it is, what it isn't, how you use it, how you go about implementing it at your business. Critically, it has to have the right culture for it to work, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'll look at content and lead nurturing and lead generation. So that's what I'm going to cover today. And before I go any further, I'd like to tell you what thought leadership is not. Two things it's not. It's not opinion. Everyone can have an opinion on something, but it doesn't make you a thought leader. And, time and again, when I consult the businesses and they say, we had an opinion piece in the newspaper over the weekend or during the week, so it's our thought leadership piece. I don't roll my eyes, but I do ask a few questions about how that came about, where it came from, is it research-based, et cetera, et cetera. Very often it's just the opinion of a partner in a firm, and I don't call that thought leadership. Instead, the market tells us what the clients want is evidence-based research. Your expert opinion and insights can add color to that and inform that, but if that's what the market's looking for. The second thing it's not is random acts of content, or curated content, or aggregated content, as it's called. Now, I've had debates around this with a number of people, but to be recognized as a thought leader in your space, you have to stick with one or two issues and go into it really deeply and preferably over a long time. On that topic of content curation, because there's so much said and written about it, and believe it or not, there's still many people out there who think content curation can make you a thought leader. I'm afraid it can't. And if ever there was a litmus test for this, it would be this little story. So Olivia is the greatest curator of content on groundwater toxicity. She's done it very cleverly through a sophisticated online portal for a few years, and as a result, she's asked to speak in an international groundwater symposium. Olivia now has a problem. The problem is that none of this is her own thinking, nor has she bothered to add any other insights, new insights or ideas to the material she's so meticulously curated for all these years. So what do you think her chances are of being recognized as a thought leader on groundwater? Pretty much zero. I really do need to stress that curated content and aggregating content will not make you a thought leader. Thought leadership is about new, bold ideas. And on that, I want to give you a definition. And look, there are lots of definitions out there. This is mine. It is long. I'm not going to read it. You can do that for yourselves. What I am going to do is I want to break it down into three distinct parts. The first one is it's about the what you deliver. These must be new insights, new ideas. The second part is it's all about the who. In other words, this is about your client and their issues. It's not about you and your products or your services. David Meerman Scott, the very well-known marketing and PR writer, often says, and I've interviewed David for my blog before, and he's so strong on this, he says that no one gives a damn about your products or services. The third part of that definition is the why, and this is the key. Why are you doing it? Ultimately, it should be about differentiating yourself from your competition, which will position you as the expert in your space, earn the trust of your market, which ultimately nurtures or generates leads resulting in a sale. And I have a confession to make at this point. I am singularly commercial in my approach to why you should have a thought leadership campaign in the first place. If it's not geared towards generating or nurturing leads to result in a sale or to build your reputation or to underpin your sales process, why are you doing it? So on that note, I want to preface this entire webinar series with some compelling sales research. Now, the research I will share is critical to understanding how your customer has and is changing. And this change means everything, I believe, to the way you market, and therefore only once I've covered this will I start lifting the lid on why thought leadership is such an important part of this change. But I must warn you, the research comes with a warning, and the warning is quite simply this: ignore it at your peril. And by the way, to save you wondering how I'm going to plow through two massive research reports, I've only picked two, as I said. There are a lot more out there. There's some great studies out there, free on the web, around how the consumer's changed, that will really corroborate the points of view I'm about to share with you. But what I've done is I've really summarized these two reports. They were quite comprehensive, into two or three key findings each, so it's made it very easy for you. And let's get right into that. The first is by Forrester. Forrester are a US-based research company, very well known. Many of you will have heard of them. And they recently conducted research across a number of B2B companies, that's business to business, about sales and marketing. And they found three key things. The first was that, to echo what David Neiman Scott was saying, buyers don't care about your products and services the same way that you do. Rather, they want to buy into your approach to how you solve their problems, your insights about their industry, how knowledgeable you are about their sector. And I know when I go in to pitch to a client, yes, it's all about chemistry. Can I work with this person? They're looking at me saying, can I work with this person? Do I trust them? But it's also about what knowledge do they have about my industry? Do they understand my industry? Do they understand the issues I face in my industry? So ultimately, they're seeking out experts. The second part of the research found that companies typically market the features and benefits of their products. Now, the problem with that is features and benefits, as we all know, can quickly be overtaken in the marketplace. You may have a window where your product or your service, for 6 months is the leading product or service in its sector, or a year, a year and a half, and we're starting to stretch it. But very quickly, those features and benefits are overtaken or copied. You have to stand out for something else, and that which brings me to the third point of this research, and that is that marketing and sales typically get involved way too late in the buying process. So by the time you receive that client or the customer call, they've already done their homework. They've done their research online. They've probably spoken to others about you, friends, current clients, ex-clients, etc. They've gathered enough information to understand who you are, what you are, and whether they can trust you. So instead, that needs to be turned on its head. Buyers need to be engaged at the earliest point of their problem-solving process, when their need is first identified, when they're doing that research, when they're looking for information in your company. That's where buyers need to be engaged. And when they touch base with you physically, it's way too late. They've already gone a long way down the track. And this is where, when we will come to later, content and thought leadership comes in. I did say there were two pieces of research I'll touch on. The second one, is backs up the Forrester trends. And it's a major piece of research that was conducted across 1,000 selling professionals in the UK, the US, Brazil, and China. It was conducted by OV1 a few years ago, 2010. But the findings still stand. If one reads any of the current research, the findings echo exactly what people are finding today. And those findings, and I've really boiled it down to two. Those findings were the following. The brands of choice, the first one is that brands of choice are delivering useful, insightful, client or consumer issue-driven content. And so what I mean by that is that instead of pumping out content you think will be useful or stuff that is overtly product, brand, or service-centric, you take the time to understand your customer or your client's most pressing issues, and you then deliver content that helps them address these issues. And as you'll discover later, this often means structuring a strategic content program with at least some research to, A, ascertain what those issues are. Now, very often you can pick that up from your salespeople or your marketing people or your business development people or whatever you call them, or maybe you're at the coalface with your clients. But it does help to actually do a little bit of research to really deep dive into what those issues are. The second part of that is that the research that you provide gives some sort of empirical evidence to inform or back up your insights. Now, remember I said earlier, everyone has an opinion, but opinions without the backing of some evidence could merely position you as just another brand pushing out tons of useless Me Too content. The second finding of this research was that those companies that are doing this successfully are using their content as, and I love this term, I wish I'd coined it, but I didn't, digital bait. They're partnering closely with marketing to do it, or sales. And one of the things we constantly emphasize when consulting to companies about their thought leadership programs is that it shouldn't reside only in the marketing or PR department. Instead, it should be integrated across all disciplines if the brand wants to make a success of it, and accrue, obviously, the full benefits that a great program can deliver. A few years ago, and you would have noticed this term in the title slide, I coined this phrase, consumer. And I coined the phrase because consumers no longer consume the way they used to do. Just think of your own consumption patterns. I don't know about you, but mine have changed dramatically because of the web. In the last year, I've started for the first time buying clothes and shoes and things online. I didn't do that before because I always thought that I had to go into the store and see if it fitted properly. I research online when I go into a client. I do my background homework. I speak to people. The content that I find online about a company is very telling about whether they're a thought leader or not, whether they're producing great content or not. And so by the time I've done my research and my reading, I'm already either vested in that particular brand or I've pushed them to one side. And my experience, my personal experience of the last 7-8 years that I've really done a deep dive on thought leadership is that thought-leading content has an even bigger impact in the business-to-business space. And there's some great examples I'll share with you around that in the next webinar next week. So to illustrate this, and before I move on, I want to share some statistics with you about content and its relevance in marketing today. And you'll see on the slide just a number of stats. I'll dig a little bit deeper for you. And these stats, by the way, are courtesy of Salesforce blog. 91% of B2B marketers use content marketing these days. 82% of B2C marketers, that's business to consumer, use content marketing. 78% of chief marketing officers think that custom content is the future of marketing. 67% more leads are generated by B2B companies with blogs over those who don't have blogs. Now, I mentioned Jeffrey Bullers at the start of this presentation. I suggest you read his website. He's a great commentator on social media. His focus for all his thought leadership and his core is his blog. And finally, the last stat. 14.6% versus 1.7% is the statistic for organic search lead close rates versus outbound marketing lead close rates. In other words, what that means is close rates of organic search, people finding you organically, is 14.6%, whereas close rates out of outbound marketing leads is only 1.7%. So finally, just one more for you to consider. I don't want to bamboozle you with stats, but interesting content is one of the top 3 reasons people follow brands on social media, and 90% of customers find custom content useful. That's another stat from Salesforce blog. So what really does this all have to do with thought leadership? And the point of the backdrop I've just given you is that content, and preferably thought-leading content, is not a nice PR or marketing gimmick. Instead, properly used, it has been for others, and it could be for you, a game changer in terms of relevance to your customers. And without doubt, the most fertile starting point is to look at the issues you and your clients or your customers face. But most importantly, it's about them. The trick here is to find a number of common enemies around which you can nurture your leads. So I want to take a practical, I'll take a practical example of a client I worked with the other day. Unfortunately, I've had to make some of these quite generic, so you can't identify who it is, because it would be a dead giveaway, and that would be disclosing a bit too much. I don't think they'd be too comfortable with that. But what these issues tell me is that this company actually, while they're massive issues for them, for their clients, they actually have an excellent opportunity to develop a trusted bond with their clients and their customers. They call them customers in this regard. And by the way, it's a universe for them of about 2,000 customers. And so enter thought leadership. And now, look, you've probably been listening going, I thought this was about thought leadership, and all this guy's been talking about is some sales research and content statistics. And you'd be right. But the case for thought leadership is a business case. And if you are going to want your MD, your Chief Executive Officer, your Chief Financial Officer, your department head, or your client to buy into why they should embark on a thought leadership campaign, you really do need to make a business case for it and be damn sure you link it to your business objectives and hard sales returns, such as lead generation and lead nurturing. But more of that later. So here's how Company X could work with these client issues on the slide to come up with a potent thought leadership campaign. Now, the idea is not to rant and rave and bash the issue or what causes it. Rather, it's about providing insights or solutions that help the client deal with them or understand them better so they can change their business strategy. Basically, you want to help them get their heads around these issues or make them think differently about them. If you can do that, you're no longer selling. That's what I call true lead nurturing. You end up a comrade in arms, someone who understands them, someone who gets their issues and can lend a hand. And the beauty of this is it allows you to focus on providing solutions without hard selling. But I want to spend a bit of time on the prospect of lead nurturing and lead generation, or sales leads, whatever you prefer to call it. And we'll try the next poll. Sorry, here we go. I hope it comes up. I'm going to ask you to participate in this, and you know, if you could answer that, that'd be great. That should be quite quick, and we'll move on. There we go. So we have the poll. Who should oversee it? Marketing department comes out streets ahead. Well, that's interesting because we'll come to that. I have a particular view on that, and we'll share that with you. But let's get back to the slides. In my view, every piece of marketing content and thought leadership material you put out should be with the intent on lead nurturing or lead generation. And if it's not, you should be asking yourself, why are you doing it? And in fact, why should the company be paying you to do it and putting money into it? But nurturing leads is not a nice to have. There's a lot of behavioral science behind it, and I can't promise to know be across all of that. But in a lot of companies, there's a heap of experience. There are a lot of people on this call who work for big multinationals, large corporates, who have an immense expertise, experience, and sophistication in terms of what works and what doesn't at a sales level and lead nurturing. And I'm going to attempt to explain my view on thought leadership, content, and lead nurturing with a model. And this is the model. We'll work from left to right. So that's you on the left. The old style of marketing was pushing out the message, being in control of the message, ready to sell brochures. A lot of websites look like online brochures and still do, much to my chagrin, and filling then qualifying a pipeline. The new way of doing things is that you are no longer in control of the message. You need to be facilitating and engaging in dialogue. It's two-way dialogue. You're not selling. You're engaging and showcasing your expertise. And a lot of clients are battling with this. They're battling to engage through social media. They're no longer in control of the message, and there's a corporate scrap heap of issues badly dealt with on social media. In the middle, if you're trying to lead, nurture, and generate leads, a stunning statistic is that 70% of those people consuming your content will buy from you or someone else in your sector. That's another stat from Salesforce. On the right-hand side, we've got the customer. They're not ready to buy or talk to you yet. They're looking online. They're doing their own research. They're in control. They know your brand before they come to you, and that's why underpinning everything at the bottom is that you have to have relevant, quality content, and you have to maintain that conversation and build trust over time. The point is that it comes back to the sales research at the beginning that I went through with you, which shows that the sale has fundamentally changed because of the way people buy. The buyer, and more so the business-to-business buyer, is fundamentally in control. And marketing needs to understand their needs and needs to synchronize their marketing throughout the buying process to make sure that they've got content that is contextually relevant at every stage of the buying cycle. And this fundamentally means a change in mindset and culture. And the hardest part of this that I see in my daily consulting is for companies to stop controlling the message and engage online in a two-way conversation. But what has also happened is that companies have become increasingly sophisticated in collecting and analyzing customer and sales data. We've all heard the term big data, and there's lots said and written about that. And I want to touch on that for a moment because it has some very exciting implications for your content and your thought leadership. And you'll notice that I do separate the two, content and thought leadership. But there are plenty of companies out there already using business intelligence and smart analytics. And for many, though, the problem is it sits in some department somewhere with only a few data geeks getting to play with it and present it to management or to the CFO. Well, I've got news for you. If you're going to do this and you've got it out there, you could already be on your way to an insightful thought leadership campaign. It's just that you may not have applied the data this way. You may not have formalized it that way yet. And it links to this term called insight selling. In other words, developing insights no one else has and then sharing it with your audience via the most effective channels possible. And thought leadership is all about that. It's all about insight selling. And the beauty of this is it allows you to sell from a completely different level of trust and empathy with your prospect or your client. So get out there and go and speak to those data geeks and see if you can conjure up some data that really delivers some wonderful insights that can help your thought leadership campaign. The key is that when you have decided on which issues to choose for your thought leadership point of view, make sure you don't identify the wrong issue. Secondly, find one that has a solution. And thirdly, focus on solutions and then share with your audience abundantly. I talk about thought leadership or thought leaders having an abundance mentality. I've never come across a thought leader who doesn't share their information. Find me one and I'll eat my presentation. And they consume this content in as many ways as possible. The best thought leadership campaigns out there either go to the heart of the pain points, or they frame new debates, or they make you think differently about an issue, or they completely shift the paradigms of a market or a sector. And they're typically long-term campaigns, not a quick, easy fix, what I call here today, gone tomorrow, or that piece of pop research that you see, the sort of omnibus survey that is pumped out as your thought leadership. That's not true thought leadership to me. If you want to make your mark, the trick is to find an area which matters to your market or your sector in which you work, and then deep dive on it for the long term. And if you're going to do this well, you have to stay the course. Many of the great thought leadership campaigns around are the long-term ones. But how you decide what thought leadership platform it is that you want to own, that's the question. How do you go about that? And I want to introduce to you a little-known fact about successful thought leadership campaigns. It's called schema cracking. I mentioned it at the beginning. And it's probably best illustrated by the story about how the Dove campaign for real beauty was born. Before I go into that story, just very briefly, schemas are things, we all have schemas, and they help us make sense of our environment. They really are our perceptual filters that we have through which we interpret new information. So we filter information, and we either discard it or it helps us inform our point of view. So why is this relevant? Because in order to change them, we need novelty. We need something new. We need to be aroused, and people, by the way, are aroused by moderately novel or schema-incongruent information. And our natural reaction is to adapt or replace our existing schemas to include this new information. By the way, I said moderately novel because if it's too novel and results in misunderstanding, we discard it. Or if it's too ahead of its time, we tend to discard it. So, schema cracking or novel ideas are critical for thought leadership. And I'll use the Dove example. You all recognize those images it's a real beauty campaign, which broke down the stereotypical views of beauty, which was showcased for so many years by the media and advertisers. And so this is how it came about, and this is a great example of a schema cracking approach. The agency at the time decided that they needed to change things up in the beauty industry from an advertising perspective. They got permission from the board of Unilever to interview some of their daughters. And they put together a 3-minute audio visual of mainly their preteen daughters talking about their own bodies, their cute noses, their freckles, their tummies that they didn't want. You can picture the scene, a little girl talking about her freckles and saying she hates them, she wants to look like so-and-so in the movies. And it was a stunning indictment on the hurt and the damage unintentionally caused by the beauty industry and the current marketing approach. And it really hit those directors in the solar plexus. The result of that was they got the go-ahead to completely change it up and start the Dove campaign for real beauty. Did the campaign work? I think a 600% increase in U.S. sales after the first few months and a 700% increase in Europe after 6 months is what you would call working. Years later, and the figures show that this was a highly successful campaign and one they have adapted and grown over the years, and it has many legs now. So that's an example of a schema cracking idea. But back to you and your thought leadership. Where do you start? I'll give you a step-by-step process in Webinar 2. But for thought leadership to flourish and grow, there are first 3 critical ingredients you will need. You should be focusing on your discussions on these 3 key areas of environment, strategy, and people. So let me tell you a little bit more about each of those. Under environment, you want an environment that supports a culture that encourages and facilitates 3 things: cross-disciplinary meetings and sharing, a sharing of information, and thirdly, a willingness to encourage, accept, and learn from ups and downs of the creative process. It's very difficult to nurture and give birth to great thought leadership without that sort of culture. You've seen it in companies you've worked with. You may have it in your own company. You could have a sales culture, a culture of research, a client-focused culture. And that's precisely what we want with companies. We want a thought leadership culture. And this entails encouraging and facilitating some of the basic characteristics displayed by successful thought leadership companies. And I'll give you 5. The best thought leadership companies have these in place: proper planning and resourcing, sharing information internally and with the market, not being scared to challenge the status quo. By the way, on that, to be a thought leader, you have to be brave. Second last one, taking a research-led approach. And lastly, having in place measurement and evaluation. If you're not measuring and evaluating and changing your campaign as you grow it, how do you know it's working? The most successful thought leadership is never reduced to a mere communications or marketing tool. And I come back to that poll. I said that was interesting that you thought it should fit under marketing. 56% of you thought it should fit under marketing. And I believe that while marketing and PR is really important in this, it needs to be owned by the C-suite. But thought leadership is client-centric, and it therefore needs a business-wide alignment between new ways of thinking in your organization's mission and vision. And this is why the C-suite is so important. Remember that if you're not addressing a client or industry-specific issue with new thinking, your thought leadership runs the risk of being one of thousands of pieces of self-serving content with no differentiation whatsoever. But critically, if it's aligned with the bigger picture goals of the organization, it has a far better chance of being a long-term campaign and not one that gets chucked out as a one-off PR, marketing, or business development campaign. Finally, you need to ensure you have sufficient differentiated thinking in your organization. You want people who are not afraid to ask bold questions, challenge the status quo, and shine a light on potentially uncharted areas of growth and profitable exploration for your clients or your customers. If you don't have these sorts of people, either change your hiring policy and approach or partner with another organization, a business association or an academic institution, who will provoke you to think differently about your industry. If you find big, bold thinkers courageous enough to take you and your clients into unexplored territory, don't play it safe. Back them. Tap into them. I've yet to find a thought leader who isn't brave. By their nature, they're not scared to challenge the status quo. They're not scared to frame or change up the debate in their industry or on a particular topic. They are typically bold in their thinking. And let me make one point quite clear again. Thought leadership is not content marketing, but without doubt, content marketing does help drive it. To put it differently, I see content marketing as a tactical thing. It's producing content, whereas I see thought leadership as strategic. It's really doing the deep dive. It's coming up with the big new ideas and insights. Or, as I like to say, thought leadership is content marketing on steroids. I'd like to end off with this table. It's the easiest way, I think, that I can find to present the differences between content marketing and thought leadership. And the good news is that this is new. It's never been published before, and I sort of really gave it some thought for this webinar in particular. So I'm very happy to have it challenged, and if you can help me tweak it, that would be great. So very open to your ideas on this. In my eyes, content marketing and thought leadership are part of the same family, but you could say that one is royalty and one is not, and there are no prizes for guessing which is which. And I'm not biased. But given how the sale has changed and how consumers have become consumers, both are critical. Content marketing and thought leadership are critical in helping generate leads for your brand. The difference, of course, is that if your content is the type of thought-leading content that truly sets your brand apart from the competition, it won't be long before you are perceived as the go-to experts in your field and reaping the rewards. One of the points I want to pick up in that table is trend spotting or trend forming, the last one under thought leadership. There's a very rich vein, and particularly for those brands out there, for those of you who are looking from your thought leadership to drive media coverage or to interest bloggers in blogging about your thought leadership point of view. Through my 25 years experience in this industry, the one thing I have learned, hopefully there are more, but the one thing I have learned is that journalists love stuff that is future-looking, that the trends that are going to come down the track that are going to impact, let's say, mergers and acquisitions or the accounting profession or whatever business it is that you're in. And if the research you've done looks into trends or even you could even form debates around what trends are going to impact your industry, that seems to be a rich vein for driving coverage. So I just wanted to make that point on that slide. Finally, it's been great chatting to you today. I mean, I am passionate about this topic, and there will be another webinar in which I'll go into a lot more detail and some great case studies on people who are doing it really well. So I've really only scratched the surface, and in webinar 2, I'm going to give you some very practical steps on how you can become a thought leader. I'm going to give you a 5-step process. I've mentioned the case studies that we'll talk through. And then in webinar 3, my co-author of our latest book, A Thought Leadership Tweet, Dr. Liz Alexander, will cover the art of storytelling and how you make your content so compelling that people have to click on it, read it, and share it, most importantly. You can contact me. There are the details. You can contact Liz. I'm really very happy to engage offline, off this webinar, with any questions you have. I'm based in Sydney. Liz is based in Austin, Texas. So if you're in those areas, I'm even happy to have a coffee catch-up with you. You can Twitter. Here's the challenge. Our Twitter handle is @LeadThought. That's LEAD Thought, THOUGHT, @LeadThought. The first 3 people who tweet me @LeadThought, your definition of thought leadership, will receive a free online copy of our book, A Thought Leadership Tweet. So if you can tweet me your definition of thought leadership, that would be great. And I'd now like to hand over to you guys to find out if there are any questions. Thank you. So we've got a number of questions. Zach has asked, what is a consumer? Zach, it's my word, so you won't find a definition in any dictionary, I'm afraid. I made that word up because of the way people consume content. So it's stolen from content, C-O-N-T, and consumer combined. And really it is that the consumer these days has changed the way they buy. They consume a lot of content before they buy from you. And if you're providing great content, you then attract those consumers. So hopefully that answers your question on that. We have another one around content creation. If it doesn't make you a thought leader, what role does it play? I think it plays a very critical role, actually. Not everybody can come up with thought-leading content. And in fact, your thought-leading content may only be once a year that you come out with your research. Well, what on earth do you do in between? So content creation, I believe, sort of really does back up. It's like the engine room of your thought leadership in a way. It can provide great backup of hints and tips for your clients, useful insights. It could be a campaign that you're running with the partners in your firm where they give their opinions on various aspects. Let's say they're lawyers, various aspects of the law across employment, mergers and acquisitions, you name it. So it really is a very important backdrop to your thought leadership content. There's some great sites on content. The Content Marketing Institute has got a heap of really great free content. I suggest if any of you haven't been there, there's a guy called Joe Polizzi, the Content Marketing Institute. I would read up about that. Anne Handley is another great writer on content. I'm not anti-content, don't get me wrong. I just don't believe that content equals thought leadership. I think the two are very distinct. On to the next question. So how do you seek out experts for your industry? Is there a process? Well, the way I understand that is experts internally or experts externally. So I'll answer both. Experts internally. Resident within any business, there's always somebody who has great knowledge about that particular sector or a particular area of that sector. And the idea is to find those people and to stimulate them to become thought leaders. And you need to actually support them in that drive. You need to sit down with them, plan what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, what the client's issues are, how their insights are going to help address that client's issue, and then how you're going to support that from a content point of view to drive that positioning for that expert. Some are reticent to stand up in front of media. That's fine. The other thing, the point I must make here is that because you're a thought leader doesn't mean that you have to engage with media. If you have a small universe of 25 or 50 clients, and those are the only people you want to influence, or the top 100 New York listed stock exchange listed companies, You don't need to put up your expert to media. Maybe it's just presenting one-on-one with boards of those companies around risk, for example. So find those experts, engage with them in a brainstorming session, tease out the areas they're comfortable to speak on, and then find out how you can back that up with research. That's internally. Externally, you may want to support that expert internally with academic research of an institution as well known in your particular area. If you don't have an expert internally, maybe you want to team up with, we did this recently with a large banking client where we teamed up with the biggest financial institute in Australia and a professor there who's well known in the industry to come up with some great research and insights, and then he stood up and presented that at a series of breakfasts. So it doesn't mean that because you don't have the expert internally that you can't find somebody externally that you can team up with. And often that external teaming actually leads you to even greater content and more resourceful thinking in terms of what you're delivering. So hopefully that answers that. Another question, how do you ensure your content is interesting? Good question. I'll come back to the client. I think this question, I'd like to turn it back to the client. If you need to be researching with your clients how your content is going down, your clients will let you know sooner or later whether it's interesting or not. And there's no better way to find out than to be discussing content with your clients or having them read stuff and getting feedback. And that's why that feedback and evaluation and measurement is so important that I spoke about in the one slide. If you're not measuring, evaluating, and getting that feedback, you're not going to know what's working and what isn't. Another question, are any of the three factors for schema cracking more important than others? If not, how do you keep a balance? No, would be the answer. None are more important than others. Schema cracking, maybe you put me on the spot there. I'd have to say novelty. If you were to push me, I'd say if your idea is not novel, then why is it going to create the breakthrough that you want? If it's also ran, if it's Me Too, you may as well not call it schema cracking. It's not going to crack anybody's schemas. You want to be jolting people out of their normal day-to-day reverie. You want to be challenging people's status quos. You want to be getting them to sit up and say, hey, that's different. I hadn't thought of that. That could help my business. I didn't know that. And you're not going to do that unless your idea is novel. Any other questions, guys? I think I've answered all of them. If there are any other questions, then fire away. No more questions? Well, then it's been great chatting to you guys, and hopefully we can link up next week where we'll share some more information with you about thought leadership.